Okay. All right, I'm going to try to speak about a few things this evening. First thing I'd like to talk about is actually the advantages of making merit. And this is something which actually isn't spoken about. It's spoken often, it's spoken of often, but the Buddha actually in one discourse gave some actual figures on the type of merit that you receive through generosity. So I'd actually just like to start with speaking about the benefits of generosity. There's a sutta where the Buddha points out for example, the Buddha pointed out if a gift is given to, say, for example, an animal, what is possible? Say, for example, if there was a hungry dog or a cat or a deer, the Buddha actually described that the merit that you make from this, in the suttas it explains, it has two explanations. The figure that the Buddha gives is 100, in that the merit that you make will come back either 100-fold or 100 lifetimes. So it's actually, according to the commentary, it explains that the merit from this will come back for 100 lifetimes. But following the literal translation in the sutta, as best as a translator could translate it, he translated it as 100-fold. So for all of these figures, you can either use 100-fold or the term fold or lifetimes. So they're actually both good. So either way you think of it, they're quite good, very generous numbers. So say, for example, if you gave an animal, if you gave a dog some food, then the merit that you create would actually come back either 100-fold or 100 lifetimes of merit that you're creating from this. So this is actually just a good thing to reflect upon, that merit is not actually something which is what you call prorata, which is not in proportion. It's much in favor of the person who makes merit. So this is something to reflect upon, something which makes the mind happy. The Buddha also spoke about, say, for example, if you were to give something to an unvirtuous person or a very bad person, then the merit that you create comes back either 1,000-fold or 1,000 lifetimes. So you can see that this is actually something which is quite important to think about. And the benefits from giving to a very virtuous person, someone who's kind and good, the merit from this comes back 100,000-fold or 100,000 lifetimes. So you can see that even if you don't have any monks around, if you have good people around, then if you are to give them anything, then the merit that you create will come back 100,000-fold or 100,000 lifetimes. So you can see this is a very good numbers possibility for everyone. And in the world you have opportunities every day to make merit. So this is one of the things which is a source of happiness for people, is to be generous and to be kind. And the Buddha actually went on to say, if one were to offer something to someone who was non-Buddhist, but who was free from kamaraga, which would be free from attachment to the sensual pleasures. This would be like a temporary freedom from attachment to the sensual pleasures. Or to give to someone who had either attained deep meditative state or jhana, or someone who had developed what you call mundane insights, which would be insights into reality, but not powerful enough to have altered their mind or to see the Dhamma completely. But so someone who would fall into any of these three categories, someone who is a non-Buddhist who is free from kamaraga or free from craving or lust for the sensual desires, or someone who has attained deep meditation, or someone who is had mundane insights, then this person is actually, if you were to offer something to this person, then the merit that you create is actually 10 times this amount, which is roughly 10 billion fold or 10 billion lifetimes. And then the Buddha then goes to explain that if you were to offer to someone who has attained to the path of stream entry, or sotapanna, then the merit that you create from offering anything to this person would actually be incalculable and immeasurable. And that's just for someone who has attained to the path of stream entry, which is the first level of enlightenment. And then to one who has attained to stream entry, also incalculable, immeasurable. And then he goes on to say also for the once returner, the non-returner, and the arhat, someone who's fully enlightened, then the merit is also incalculable, immeasurable. And then also for a Pacceka Buddha, one who is what is called a non-speaking Buddha, or privately attained Buddha. This is also incalculable, immeasurable. And then to an Arahat Sammasambuddha, who is a fully attained Buddha, this is also incalculable, immeasurable. So whatever is offered is just incalculable, the amount of merit that you create from this. And the Buddha actually goes on to say that even to give to what you would call the entire Sangha, the entire group of monastics, this is actually more merit than to give to the Buddha alone. And he said even if the Sangha, even if the group of monks was filled with horrible monks, very, very bad monks without attainment and very, very low standards, still the merit from this, because you're giving to the entire Sangha, is of greater merit than to give to the Buddha alone. And it's even greater merit to give to the entire Sangha with the Buddha, which is a kind of clause that you can make. So the reason I speak about these things is that one of the things in a monastery is we often have duties and we have things to do. So, for example, if we're doing our chores or we're cleaning or we sweep for a little bit, you can actually do this as an offering to the entire Sangha with the Buddha at its head. So this is something which actually creates incredible merit for your happiness in the present and also for the future. And also too, when anyone is offering food, you can offer to one monk, or you can offer to the group of monks here, or you can offer to the whole Sangha. And you can also include the Buddha within your intention. So you can offer to the Buddha as well as to the Dhamma and the entire Sangha, so that you're covering everything auspicious. And this way, the merit that you're creating is more powerful. And there's also, this is just kind of my commentary, this isn't from this particular sutta. Kruba Ajahns, the highly developed monks, usually suggest when you're going to create merit, the power of your mind is very important. So one thing that can be very beneficial before you create merit, it can be very good to do chanting or to sit meditation first, because these are things which tend to make the mind very bright and very, very strong. And when the mind is very bright and very strong, then the merit that you create is more powerful, and the intention is more powerful. So the result is more powerful. So this is kind of a skillful means of many of the enlightened monks, is they suggest that making merit is wonderful, but to sit meditation and to chant are actually can be stronger merit, and can be more profound types of merit, which can make the mind very powerful, very strong. So, actually there was a very great monk in Thailand who I met many years ago, and he mentioned the two most powerful types of merit that you can create. He asked all the monks, there was a group of us, this was in Thailand, and he asked the monks, he says, do you know the two most powerful types of merit that are possible in the world? And none of us knew. And he said, in his opinion, this is what he said. He said, there's two most powerful types of merit. He said, sitting meditation and walking meditation. And he said, those are the two most powerful types of merit that you can create. So he at that time had been going through some, he was actually towards the end of his life, and he had been going through a lot of sickness and illness. And he had mentioned that he had a lot of karma from his past, and this is normal, so he had to accept his bad karma, but he was also doing his best to create wholesome karma, or wholesome merit, to also lighten his difficult karma. And he says mostly what he was trying to do was to sit meditation and walk meditation. So he said this is the most powerful way to create merit and also kind of help to burn off your old bad karma. So, and also speaking of that, there was a very great monk in Thailand, but he passed away, which is normal. We've actually had very great monks in Thailand who have passed away recently, quite a few. Lumpur Plian, a very great monk, very beautiful monk. He just passed away. He visited here for, I believe, 2 weeks. And very special, very gifted monk, lots of loving kindness. He passed away, not actually, it's almost been just a few weeks now. It's not a long time since he's passed away. And even the Buddha, with all of his incredible merit, he also passed away. So even great Kruba Ajahns and even the Buddha pass away. So this is something to reflect upon. It's that even people with great merit and people with very beautiful minds also pass away. So this is nothing abnormal, and it's not like a punishment to pass away. It's just the normal kind of cycle of life. So this is actually something the Buddha taught people to reflect upon often. Just not to frighten people, but to establish people in the wholesome, and to establish people in awareness and mindfulness in the present. There was actually a very wealthy Brahmin, who's kind of like a high priest in India at that time, who approached the Buddha. This was many years ago, of course. And he mentioned to the Buddha, he said, staying alone in a forest must be very difficult for monks or for anyone. And he said that it might actually be so frightening, a person might actually go mad by staying alone. And the Buddha actually mentioned that yes, it is very difficult to live alone in the forest, and it is actually possible that people can actually go mad living in a forest. And the Buddha actually kind of, have to forgive me, I don't know if it's the same sutta, but I believe it is, where the Buddha actually explains that there's 4 types of people in the world who are very afraid of death. And there's another 4 types of people who actually have no fear of death. And so the Buddha went to explain the 4 people who are quite afraid of death. He said the first type of person is someone who's tends to be someone who tends to be a bit more beautiful, a bit more attractive, and has an attachment to their own physical body. And he says the type of person who has an attachment to their body would naturally be afraid of death, thinking this wonderful body will be separated from me, and I will be separated from it. So this is the first type of person who's afraid of death. And he said the second person who's afraid of death is the one who delights in all of the sensual pleasures, all of the beautiful things, the beautiful art, the beautiful music, delicious food, nice smells, beautiful people, very common attachment, art, everything like this. Like this type of person, if one has a strong attachment to all of the beautiful things in the world, then this person is also afraid of death, thinking all of these beautiful things will be separated from me, and I will be separated from them. So this is the second type of person who is afraid of death. And the third type of person who is afraid of death is the one who's basically hasn't made any merit and has done a lot of unwholesome things. And a person who hasn't made any merit and has done many unwholesome things would naturally be afraid of death, because they know that, you'll find different opinions now, but a person who believes in karma and rebirth would actually know that there's a result from doing many unwholesome things. and there's a result from not making merit. So this is a type of person who would be afraid of death because they know in their next life or in the future they've made such bad karma and they've made such little good karma that they naturally don't want to die. They're afraid of the future. So this is the third type of person who's afraid of death. And the fourth type of person who's afraid of death is the one who's hasn't realized the meaning of life, hasn't figured out why we're alive, and doesn't know, hasn't reached certainty. Basically, if you could say, most people are searching for truth. And for many people, life is a search for truth. So, if someone has not found truth yet, basically someone is not sure the meaning of life, or not sure the meaning of truth. So someone who is basically not finished with life in a way, or hasn't realized the ultimate meaning of life. So this is a person who's also afraid of death, because they're not ready yet, because they haven't really figured out why we exist, why we're born, or what are we supposed to do with our life. So this is a fourth person who is afraid of death. And the Buddha went on to explain the four people who are not afraid of death. And the first person who is not afraid of death is the one who knows that the body is impermanent. And knowing that the body is impermanent and accepting that naturally reflects thus that of course the body will be separated from me and I will be separated from it, and that's just the nature of the body. And basically if you look in the world, you don't find anyone who's, say, 5,000 years old or 500 years old. You know that it's just natural for people that the body is just impermanent. That's the nature of things. So this is the first person who is not afraid of death, the one who has reflected and seen the impermanence of the body. And the second person who is not afraid of death is the one who has reflected on the sense pleasures. Say, for example, if you were to eat some ice cream or some donuts or whatever, doesn't matter, something that you like, and there is a type of happiness which arises. But that happiness has the very tendency to arise and then to sustain for a period of time, and then to slowly fade away and then to cease. That happiness also dies. It's also like a death process. But this very process, just watching this and paying attention to this, we can see that in whatever is delicious, there is a happiness, but there is no true happiness in something delicious. So no matter how many times we eat something, there's also always going to be a happiness which arises, but it simply fades away and disappears again. So it's not that there is no happiness in it, but there is no true happiness in anything delicious. And so it's the same with anything beautiful. When you see something beautiful, there's a happiness which arises, but there is never a true happiness. So if you can see this kind of tendency in anything delicious or anything beautiful or anything very fragrantly beautiful, and in beautiful people or art or music, you just watch. You watch to see if there's any true happiness in it. And you'll tend to see that it does have a happiness, but it doesn't have a true happiness. So just watching this tendency and realizing that in whatever is a sense pleasure, or in whatever of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, basically all of these things are by their nature impermanent, and they are by their nature lacking the quality of true happiness, or what the Buddha would call dukkha, which can be translated as suffering, and it can also be translated as merely the lack of true happiness, or also unsatisfactory or insatiating. So, if one realizes this, if one realizes that the sense pleasures have no true happiness in them, then one doesn't have an attachment to them. And by not having an attachment to them, one would actually qualify as the second person who's not afraid of death, because one doesn't have that attachment to the sense pleasures. So this is the second person who's not afraid of death. The third person who's not afraid of death is the one who has made lots of merit, and the one who has not done a lot of evil, or who has not made a lot of unwholesome karma or kamma. So this person knows, if I were to pass away, then I have only happiness in my future, because I've made a lot of merit and I haven't made unwholesome karma. So the future will only be better and brighter and more improved. So this person doesn't have a fear of death. And then the fourth person, who is not afraid of death, is actually, like just to remind you, like the fourth person who was afraid of death in the previous list was the person who doesn't know the meaning of life yet, who hasn't reached certainty in the meaning of life. And the Buddha actually listed the fourth person who is not afraid of death is actually the Sotapanna, like the one who has entered the stream. Because this is someone who's seen the path directly, who has directly realized, has directly seen truth or reality. And this is a person who is on a fixed course to eventually become fully enlightened. So this person has directly realized the meaning of life, or has directly seen truth. So this person is now absolutely free of any doubt. So this person is free of doubt and has reached certainty in life. So this is the fourth person who is not afraid of death. So actually I mention these things. These are can be a bit abstract. But the Buddha actually generally suggests to people to use recollection of impermanence and even recollection of death as not as something unwholesome, but as something actually quite wholesome. Because it's quite common for people to become a bit too relaxed or a bit complacent in life. So the Buddha actually suggested this as a skillful means for people to reflect on this often. Like, say, for example, if people were to reflect possibly once a day, if this was my last day of life, what would I do with it? And this is just an example. There's many, many different types of ways to reflect on impermanence, or reflect on the importance of life, or even the importance of this very day. So this is something which is actually a bit drawing the mind more into the present moment, and drawing the mind to reflect on what's most important in life. Because it can be quite easy to let many days go by, and we neglect to do what's most important. So if people reflect daily, or of course this is optional, all of the Buddha's suggestions are completely optional, but if a person reflects often, if this was my last day of life, what would I do with it? Or what would be the best thing to do if I had only one day of life left in this world? And when you think in this way, it can be a very skillful means to clear out everything which is unimportant, and to kind of reprioritize everything in your life. Like if you think if you only have one day left to live, then most people wouldn't watch television, and probably wouldn't go online or Facebook, or some people would, but actually some people would even try to, tell their parents that they love them, or speak to their children, things like this, because these are very important for people. So this is a reflection which doesn't have a direct answer, but this is something which the Buddha suggested to people to reflect upon often, in order to get us to remember what's most important in our life, and to redirect the mind. So if you reflect on this, then it's constantly redirecting the mind to live more in the present, and to do what's most important today, because you don't know how much longer you might have. So this can be a very powerful tool, even for letting go of excess thinking, which is very common for people. Just if I might kind of change subjects for a minute, it's quite common for people to get lost in thinking and get lost in moods. So one of the things, this actually can tie in, this reflection on death, or reflection on the importance of life, or the importance of of just this day, or the importance of the present moment. Say, for example, if one had just one day of life left in the world, would you spend your day thinking? Or would you spend your day being angry at someone? Or would you spend your day like bearing a grudge? Or would you spend your day like planning revenge on someone who's harmed you? So this can be a skillful means in order to help to free the mind and to get the mind more in the present moment. And also even you can, this is something which the Buddha suggests you can practice in many different ways. Like say for example, if everyone to reflect, if I only had 5 minutes left in this world, what would I do with it? Or if I only had 5 seconds left, what would I do with it? And on that subject, I've actually heard that a very great monk in Thailand, in Pathum Thani, he quite often suggests to people, for lay people, if they've ever offered anything to the group of monks, or to anyone in general, that if you're coming to the end of your life and you're not sure how to direct the mind, then one of the most wonderful things you can do is to reflect upon generosity that you've done in your life, and especially things that you've offered to the monks or to the sangha can be very powerful. And this is a wholesome mind state which will tend to incline the mind towards the heavenly realms. So he said this can be a very powerful tool at the end of your life, because sometimes people, when they come to the end of their life, most people aren't prepared, and because most people don't like to reflect upon the end of life. Most people want to reflect on life. So this can be a very powerful, skillful means to kind of keep in your memory banks, to kind of remember if you ever really do come to the end of your life and you're not quite sure how to direct the mind. One of the wonderful things you can do is direct your mind towards reflection on generosity that you've done, or helping anyone, anything wholesome, because if the mind tends to go towards regret or fear, it tends to pull the mind in a more negative way. So this can be a very good, skillful means for people. So, getting back to this, just to mention, I had for myself a couple of months ago, I had a dream, and in this dream, I was basically in a situation where I had a couple of seconds left to live, and it was just a dream. But I remember in this dream, in my last 5 seconds, I reflected on one thing. I reflected on how much did I practice in this life. That was the thing I was most concerned with my last 5 seconds of life. And I realized that was the most important thing for me, was practicing. And then as kind of a trailer thought, I also thought, well, also how much did I practice in this life, and also how much merit did I make, as kind of the two most important things in my life. So this can be kind of again, this is not like a suggestion, but something to consider. So basically, okay, sorry. So now I'd also like to change again. Getting back to, say for example, when we're eating something delicious and we experience a type of happiness, this happiness will tend to arise and then fade away and disappear. And so basically we can use this to reflect upon the things of life. Many things are like this. They tend to have a nature of being impermanent. And then if we can reflect on this often, then the mind actually tends to loosen its attachment to them. Because generally what we'll see is anything in the world, and this is something it's nothing I can tell you or explain to you, but it's something each person has to reflect upon. But when you look at all the things in the world, you'll tend to find they have the same tendency. They tend to be all impermanent, and they tend to be all lacking the quality of true happiness. So if the mind can see that, and this is something everyone has to reflect upon for themselves, if you can see that clearly for yourself repeatedly, then the mind has less inclination towards the sensual pleasures and towards beautiful things and sights and sounds and touches and tastes and smells. And it has more of an inclination towards practice and to making merit. So this is something which can be a reflection which can help the mind to practice. And this, especially for meditation, if you can understand this in, say, for example, eating something delicious, that a type of happiness arises and disappears, you can also, basically, if you watch this process, it's an arising, a sustaining temporarily, and then a fading away, and then a ceasing. It's a death. It's an ending. It doesn't like fade away to like 5% and then sustain that way. It ends completely. So if you can see this same process with your own thoughts and with your emotions, this can be very good for meditation. Because if you're able to follow your thoughts, like say for example, if I was going to ask everyone to kind of establish mindfulness and to be very careful, and if I were to suggest to everyone, you can think about anything that you want, but don't think about a kitten or a puppy. And then most people actually have the tendency, when you ask people not to think about a kitten or a puppy, they tend to think about a kitten or a puppy. So it's actually kind of a silly example, but it's just something to get you to watch. The mind is actually triggered by certain words or by sounds. And what we tend to think of is our thoughts which we control, which are very personal, are actually something which can be manipulated by other people. So when you try to not think, you tend to think more. So you can actually see the same process is happening. There's something which is arising, it's sustaining, and it's fading away, and it's ceasing. So this is actually where you can actually, the important thing in this process is not to cut off thoughts and not to control thoughts. But here the important part is actually just to be able to step back and be able to know the thoughts, to be aware. And when you can actually possibly understand a bit better, this is a bit of a visual thing. It's, say for example, if you had a flower or lotus, and inside this lotus you had another lotus, and this lotus on top has this tendency of opening and closing constantly. And this lotus on the bottom has this tendency of always being open. So in this analogy, it's kind of like our thinking and our moods, which are always changing. This is like something which is always in awareness. The true seat, and the kind of like the heart where these things are taking place, it's always taking place in awareness. But we tend to notice the flower or the lotus which is opening and closing. But in truth, where we should be spending our time or our practice is more on the bottom lotus, which is the awareness part. So this is actually kind of what Ajahn Chah referred to as our real home. This is basically where we should be living, in awareness. But because most of us tend to follow the moving parts, the exciting parts, which is going to be the things which are changing, the changing thoughts, the changing moods, which seem to be more exciting, so the mind follows them more. But in truth, those things aren't really our mind. And the mind is much more the bottom lotus, which is the awareness part. And this is where we should be spending our time and spending our practice. But it's difficult because it's not as interesting as our thoughts and our moods. So this is a skillful means in order to train in meditation, is to try to get the mind to trust in the awareness part of the mind and to not trust in the thoughts and moods. So this is difficult and it takes time, but it works. So, okay, I think I've spoken enough. I hope anything in the talk was beneficial, and if anything was frightening or annoying or agitating, I apologize. And I hope hopefully you maybe might remember one or two things from the talk, but if not, that's okay. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Sadhu, sadhu.